Following the end of the Second World War, the advent of television allowed for thousands of new advertising opportunities, visible to millions of Americans at once. Tobacco companies, looking for ways to broaden their market, saw the perfect opportunity. For nearly 30 years, Big Tobacco was one of the largest advertisers on the planet, focusing most of their marketing on the emerging market of television and its viewers. Following pressure from health officials, in 1970, Congress, as well as the Nixon administration, banned tobacco advertisements on television, fearing a public health crisis. Although it would seem to many that cigarette marketing is a thing of the past, it is as effective and prevalent as ever. Utilizing billboards and signs, tobacco companies focus their advertisements on the poor and minority-heavy communities, resulting in higher rates of tobacco usage and smoking, as well as deaths associated with it within these groups. Often considered a social injustice, it has become exceedingly clear in recent years that Big Tobacco deliberately markets and has marketed to the poor and disenfranchised. Cigarette companies will utilize harmful and manipulative tactics in an attempt to sink the hooks of addiction into the poor. In areas of a lower socioeconomic status, for example, convenience stores will sell cheap, single cigarettes, as a full pack may be too expensive for many residents. In a similarly reprehensible manner, tobacco companies would, per the CDC in 2019, include coupons on tobacco with one's food stamps. Their end goal is clear. Once a person is addicted to nicotine, Big Tobacco can count on their business for years to come. Exemplifying this, a pack-a-day smoker will spend nearly $2,000 on cigarettes per year, even those who float at or around the poverty line. Although smoking rates nationally have seen a significant decrease, poorer communities have uncharacteristically high rates of tobacco usage per the CDC. Nicotine, the addictive substance in tobacco, can produce a mild euphoria, temporarily reducing stress and hunger. Cigarette manufacturers are fully aware of this and take advantage of it to the best of their ability. People living in poverty are often under significant stress, and tobacco companies market cigarettes as having stress-relieving properties, claiming it can calm your nerves. The withdrawal symptoms of nicotine, which include agitation, anger, extreme hunger, and insomnia, with the addition of financial stressors, significantly decreases the chances of a successful attempt at quitting nicotine. For the rest of the country, the chances of successfully quitting nicotine is at nearly 60%. Per the Truth Initiative in 2019, in communities sitting at or below the poverty line, the chances are much lower, barely sitting at a 30% chance of a successful attempt at quitting. By making sales easier, cheaper, and far more convenient, Big Tobacco has made smoking easier and quitting much harder. Not only are cigarettes much harder to quit in these areas, they are also far easier to access than in wealthy communities. Convenience stores are much more common in impoverished areas and have a wider selection of, as well as easier access to, tobacco products. There are significantly greater amounts of specialty tobacco shops as well, selling cigarettes along with chewing tobacco and cigars. These convenience stores and specialty shops have been shown to be clustered around schools in these poor communities. Looking at the data, the strategy of cigarette companies becomes extremely clear. They attempt to target the most vulnerable market they can. They sink the hooks of nicotine addiction into the poor and impoverished, the people with the least incentive to quit. In these disenfranchised areas, Big Tobacco starts young, and per the Truth Initiative in 2019, they attempt to cluster their stores and advertising around schools. They know that once you are addicted, you can be counted on as a customer for life, even if they have to sell it to you one cigarette at a time. After the end of World War II, the rate of tobacco usage in the United States skyrocketed. As the health risk associated with smoking became clear, Big Tobacco worked around the clock to cast doubt on these claims. These companies hired well-known doctors and chemical analysts and paid them to write bogus journals and conduct deceptive studies, attempting to disrupt the medical consensus. Tobacco use being highly linked to cancer and an early death. Once the facts became too clear to deny, the smoking rate in the United States plummeted. Those with no reason to quit or no knowledge of the risks were the only ones left smoking. In 2019, greater than 30% of adults living below the poverty line were regular smokers, compared to only 14% of the larger population. Similarly, those that did not graduate high school reported cigarette usages nearly twice that of the general population, per the Counter Tobacco Institution in 2019. You can see this in my visual aid that I will present to you right now. As you can see in this bar graph, the data is exceedingly clear. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, referred to as the CDC, claims that those educated at or below the high school level smoke for nearly twice as long as those with a bachelor's degree. They also claim that those living in poverty smoke nearly twice as much as those above it. This not only becomes a medical issue, but an ethical one. In their reprehensible pursuit of profit, Big Tobacco has effectively deemed the uneducated less deserving of a long and healthy life. Although studies on the difference in tobacco advertising in certain areas have been conducted, seldom do they need to be actually read for one to come to the same conclusions the researchers did. When I visited an affluent area of Charlotte, such as Ballantyne, cigarettes may not even cross your mind. It's rare to see anybody buying a pack at the store, and it is much less common to see one outside smoking one. When you visit a convenience store or gas station, you aren't bombarded with advertisements for tobacco. You may see one sign in the window or a price decrease on the wall in the back where they keep the tobacco products, but you wouldn't ever see them right in front of you. Their only presence is discreetly behind the counter. Now, if you visit a lower income, minority heavy area such as the area around Steel Creek on South Tryon, the difference quickly presents itself. Cigarette advertising is unavoidable there, with posters on the windows of nearly every convenience store. Dedicated tobacco and vape shops are extremely prevalent, something seldom seen in more affluent areas. Not only are the differences found in advertising, it's also found in the pricing of the tobacco product itself. For example, at Harris Teeter on Ballantyne Commons, a single pack of Marlboro Reds costs nearly $7.50. This same product at the Grab and Go convenience store on South Tryon Street in Steel Creek costs nearly $2 less, at only $5.25 per. Now, when I went to the Grab and Go on the weekend, I spoke to the attendant there. Her name was Taylor. When I spoke to Taylor about the discrepancy in price and advertisements, she expressed that she was previously unaware that such a difference in price even existed. She told me that it had always been priced that way and she never thought into it at all. She told me she's not a smoker herself, so the price never concerned her beyond just counting the money for it and making sure it was paid for. Now, when I asked her on average how many people she sells cigarettes to per day, her response was absurd. She told me that when she works weekends, she sells them to nearly half the people that come into the convenience store. She said most of the people that come in there for cigarettes are chewing tobacco. And then she expressed me the most damning piece of evidence, that the gas pumps outside have not worked for years. People just come there for food, alcohol, and cigarettes. Now, unlike Taylor, when I spoke to the customer service attendant at Harris Teeter in Ballantyne, her name was Sarah. She was acutely aware of the price difference in tobacco. She told me that it's pretty rare for people to buy cigarettes there, and she said that I'm pretty sure that the prices at the Harris Teeter are lower than the prices at the Ballantyne Express down the street, but she would imagine that it's fairly rare to buy cigarettes there too. Now, when I asked about their tobacco advertising tactics at Harris Teeter, she said, "We don't have any cigarette ads up here anyway, nothing like that. We have the tiny signs, the one that shows you which packs are resealable," but she said they didn't have any real ads. Now, when we look at the evidence, the differences are clear. Tobacco products are pushed to the most vulnerable, the poor, the desperate, the uneducated, perpetrated not only by the tobacco companies themselves. Convenience stores and supermarkets must also take responsibility for their reprehensible actions, the promotion of deadly products to the poor. Through advertisements and marketing, cigarettes are promoted to the impoverished throughout their childhood, with many convenience stores and advertisements being placed in close proximity to school zones. Additionally, the inclusion of tobacco coupons within one's food stamps is similarly reprehensible. Taking these into account, in addition to the significant difference in price between affluent and lower income areas, a clear conclusion can be drawn. Big Tobacco has and continues to market their deadliest products to the most vulnerable subsets of our society. If you aren't outraged about the way that the tobacco companies market their products and push them, then you aren't listening and you aren't paying attention. Any logical person would be outraged by the fact that they have effectively deemed the poor and the uneducated as being less worthy of a long and healthy life. Thank you for your time.